Hello there, Ballard students. This is Miss Wythe coming at you with a photosynthesis modeling exercise. I'm going to try to do it larger on the whiteboard here this time instead of this tiny reaction molecule chart. So I'm going to walk you through what I've got going on here. So for photosynthesis, we're talking plants. It's my plant. Down here is the roots. For what type of molecules are these? This is a carbon dioxide molecule, so the carbons are going to be black, the oxygens are going to be red, but I didn't have enough oxygen, so these ones here that are covered in the red washi tape will also be considered oxygens. Okay, so just kind of use your imagination. All of these are considered carbon dioxide molecules, CO2. Okay. Carbon dioxide is a gas, and it's found in the atmosphere. So I'm going to lay these out here. This is going to be the air space around the plant. And down here by the roots, we've got water molecules. So H2O, we've got H2 for the hydrogens in white, and O, the oxygen in red, so that is a water molecule. And plants are going to access their water with their roots. So I've got the water molecules, 6 of them down here in the ground. Okay, so if I were to write out the matter reactants, like what are the things that we're going to use to get photosynthesis started, we need 6 carbon dioxides, okay, plus 6 water molecules. Okay, so 6 CO2 plus 6 H2O, and that's taking care of the matter. But if you recall in our previous lessons, these are inorganic, low energy molecules. They don't have any of our high energy bond indicators on them. I've got them off to the side here. Bonding a carbon to an oxygen or an oxygen to a hydrogen is classified as a lower amount of energy. There is still energy there, but these are not fuel sources of molecules. This is not a molecule that will burn or can be used for fuel by the plant. So if all I have is carbon dioxide and water just hanging out, I'm not going to be doing photosynthesis, right? We know that there is a critical piece missing here, and that is the energy needed to get us to the other side so that we can make high energy glucose and build up more matter in the plant. You can't go from low energy molecules to high energy molecules without adding in another source of energy here as a reactant. And that is where light energy comes into play, right? So sunshine, I'm going to move the carbon dioxides over here. Light energy is going to be our source, so photosynthesis is only able to be happening during the daytime, and I'm going to throw some of these high energy bonds. They're not yet bonds, chemical energy bonds, because they're not in a molecule yet, but it's the energy of light, okay? So I've just got them all here sort of hanging out with the light energy from the sunshine, okay? How are all these things getting into the plant? Like the light energy is outside, or if you're in a greenhouse, you're using lamps and things like that. Carbon dioxide as a gas is going to get into the plant, because if you zoom into the leaf here, zoom out, there are little openings in the underside surface of the leaves called stomata. And I'm doing a poor job of drawing them, okay? And they're holes that the carbon dioxide is able to, as a gas, transfer into. Throughout the day, those holes can open and close depending upon the needs of the plant and how dry and airy it is, because it doesn't want to evaporate all of its water, but it does need to get in this building block, because this carbon from the air is going to be the carbon that's going to become part of the plant in the end. So the leaves is the way that the carbon dioxide gets into the plant. Okay. The water is a little more straightforward, right? Probably you've heard this before. Water is going to be drawn up through the roots. So the pores in the roots and the holes, it's going to pull in the water, and the water is all we're going to need to do photosynthesis and get our glucose and oxygen in the end. A plant, though, needs more than just making glucoses, right? A plant would need to make protein, and protein requires nitrogen. That's not part of photosynthesis. You can see there's no blue nitrogen atoms in play on the board here, because you don't need nitrogen to do photosynthesis and make glucose. But for other reactions of the plant, like making protein, along with the water would be other minerals, nitrogens, potassium, calcium, magnesium that the plant would need for other chemical reactions, but not photosynthesis. Okay, so the water is going to come up through the roots, get drawn up the stems of the plant, and start to have a party here with the carbon dioxides in the leaves. The leaves are the part of the plant that is doing photosynthesis. It's not happening in the roots because we don't have access to the sunlight energy. The stems, their job is just moving the matter up and down. You may have heard of xylem and phloem in a previous PowerPoint or lesson. Xylem helps get the water up. I think of X is close to W in the alphabet, so the xylem brings the water up, and the phloem is going to take the food and move it all over the plant when we're done with it. Okay, so now I'm going to do a chemical reaction, and bear with me as I rearrange all these bonds, but we're going to start taking this light energy and storing it into high energy bonds and get a new molecule in the end. We're going to get glucose and then something else left over. Okay, so glucose will be C6, H12, O6. So I'm going to make sure I pull all those pieces, and then I am going to have something left over because I have definitely more than just those atoms here, and there's going to be extra pieces. Okay, so every time I make a carbon to carbon or carbon to hydrogen bond, I'm going to use up some of these, and then we'll count them in the end. Okay, so here I go. Make sure I don't grab any extra pieces. Changing the length of the gray bonds. These are the ones, the bendy ones get used when there's a double bond, and the short straight ones are used when there's a single bond. That change is not a critical or important change. It's just the limitations of the plastic. Okay, so I've used up all the carbons. I've got the basic structure of glucose. It's a 6-atom ring. One of them is oxygen and 5 carbons, and then 1 carbon sticks out. So I'm going to go ahead and use up some of my high energy bonds to do that whenever I had a carbon to another carbon, just because it's going to get a little denser as I get everything else on here. So all this sunlight energy during the reactions of photosynthesis is getting converted or transformed into now stored chemical energy, and it's in the glucose molecule here. All right, glucose underneath. All right. Now I'm going to fill in, because every carbon likes to have 4 bonds. So if it doesn't have 4 bonds, I'm going to be filling in the gaps with some hydrogens or OH groups to make the carbons happy. So that's a carbon to hydrogen bond. I'm going to put another twist tie. That's a carbon to oxygen, so it won't need a twist tie. The one below it will. So I'm splitting up water, I'm splitting up the carbon dioxides, and I'm using the same atoms, because I can't destroy the matter, to rebuild a different molecule. So I'm changing the bonds, but the number of atoms has stayed the same. I haven't reached in and gotten different atoms. I'm just adjusting the bond pieces. Okay, so I covered the carbon-to-carbon bonds. I'm going to start moving things over. Erase this just so we can get a little neater place. Well, there goes everything else. And now I'm going to keep using the sunlight energy to store up now in these high energy carbon to hydrogen bonds. So anytime I have a black one to a white one. And I'm going to count as I go. So far we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Here's number 7. Number 8. 9. 10. 11. And 12. All right. Okay, so here is our glucose molecule. The light energy that we started with in the reaction has been converted now to stored chemical energy. I'll put that under the glucose there. It's now a transformation of energy into these high energy bonds. This glucose is now a fuel source. This is a building block that the plant can make things out of. This is the food that we eat when we eat plants. And so now this is a fuel. All this leftover, right, these are all oxygens, even though they're different colors. This is the oxygen gas that plants give off in this reaction. And thank goodness, because it's what animals and plants in the end do end up breathing. So let's see how many we get. Got 1. 2. 3. 4. 5 and 6. And again, don't worry about all the extra plastic bonds. That's just the limitations of our modeling kit and structure. All right, so 6 oxygen molecules. 3. I'll write that down. And that's O2 gas, okay? So the glucose remains in the plant, okay? This is now plant building block. This could be plant food, that the plant could consume its own glucose in cellular respiration to get energy, where the oxygen is going to leave as a gas, okay? So this leaves the plant, and that makes our atmosphere have available oxygen. If we didn't have plants doing photosynthesis, our planet would not have an oxygenated atmosphere for all the animals that need that. So we have had an energy transformation from light energy to chemical energy. You could also call it potential energy, stored chemical energy, but we're now talking about those high energy carbon to carbon, carbon to hydrogen bonds. It's stored in the glucose. We haven't stored any of the energy in the oxygen. Oxygen is inorganic and a low energy molecule. It's just the byproduct of this process. If you were tracking which ones went where, like the carbon, okay, so actually I'll go through this. The carbon atoms, if we retract these, started in the air as carbon dioxide, and the carbon atoms end up as solid matter in the plant as part of the glucose. Okay? The hydrogen atoms started in water coming from the soil, and they end up stored also as solid matter in the glucose of the plant. Okay? The oxygen is coming from two different places, so it's a little harder to follow. If you go deeper into the actual reactions of photosynthesis, you'll see that it's the oxygens of water that actually are these oxygens of the oxygen gas specifically, and the oxygens of carbon dioxide are the oxygens that end up in glucose, but that is kind of beyond the scope of just biology class. It's more of an AP bio aspect, but the oxygen sources come from the air and the water, and the oxygen releases or products, we end up with oxygen stored in the plant matter, and then oxygen gas being released from the plant. That gas would also be released out the leaves, those little stomata openings once again. So the plant breathes out of its leaves, pulling in carbon dioxide and releasing oxygen gas as a process of, oh, a big word, photosynthesis. I can do it. All right. That should be it. Again, you've got the formula here, but there were 12 energy units or twist ties involved in this modeling. We end up using them all, storing them on those carbon to carbon, carbon to hydrogen bonds. We didn't have any stored as chemical energy at the beginning because it was all light energy. If you turn this off, this reaction does not happen, right? If it's nighttime or the plant does not have access to sunlight, photosynthesis can't happen. The plant can't make glucose, and if that's the case, the plant doesn't have food, the plant can't get its own energy through cellular respiration, the plant can't grow larger, that plant's gonna die, right? Plants are pretty cool. They're autotrophs, self-feeders or self-consumers. This is the process of them making their own food, just like the food you and I eat. They just can't go to the drive-thru to get it. They make it themselves. All right? So I hope you enjoyed photosynthesis. Take your time, go through the modeling questions, and this is here as a resource for you. Bye.